welcome to It's Just Wrestling. I'm Russ Joy. Now, in fairness, at the beginning of the year, I said to you every Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, that is not happening right now. I think if you're in Hawaii right now, at least when I'm recording this, it's not even live. I didn't even put it out to the fine folks in Hawaii, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around 8:30 in the morning in Hawaii. It might not be. It doesn't matter. We have a lot to get into and not a lot of time to do it this week. It's going to be a shorter show as I still try to figure out the balance here of how long an episode really needs to be. It doesn't matter. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but what we do have to get into is what happened this week. Raw officially went to Netflix. I don't know if you heard it. I don't know if you noticed it in the, 40, 50 different times they mentioned it on Monday night, but Raw has moved to Netflix. There were some good things on the show. We'll get to those. There were some things that I viewed as big old negatives. Then one of those big old negatives was kind of addressed on NXT on Tuesday, which we'll get to briefly as well. And then Wednesday, I was like, oh, all right, based on the reaction to Raw, especially among more of the diehard wrestling fan base, clearly Dynamite's going to be an absolute on-fire show. And I had some moments in the show where I felt very good about Dynamite, and I had some moments where I didn't feel quite as good. But we're going to get into all that because that is what the show is about. We are going to be fair. Positives, negatives, everything in between. But the first thing that we have to get to, obviously, is the biggest story coming out of Monday Night Raw, or at least the one that I considered to be the biggest thing on Monday Night Raw. And that, of course, was the return of The Rock, who showed up right after. Now, Netflix getting Raw was a big deal. And in fact, in the midst of this show being on again, off again, I broke down the initial news of the deal between the WWE and Netflix and said, oh, this could be a really big deal. It could be a huge deal. Cord cutting is becoming more and more of a thing. Netflix, which at some point looked like, I don't know, people might be kind of walking away from Netflix. Remember, there was the initial big boom and the things around like House of Cards and shows like that. Then it kind of felt like it hit a dip. They've been dabbling more and more into live entertainment. We saw the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, and it kind of broke the internet, sort of broke Netflix, and it felt like, all right, they're gaining their bearings. They're getting their bearings, and eventually, when Raw goes live on Netflix, it's going to probably be a smooth process. And in fairness, I'm going to start with the biggest positive of the entire show. It looked incredible. Now, granted, the week before, AEW Dynamite had the simulcast on Max. And I think anybody who watched Dynamite the first week that they did the simulcast, I compared YouTube TV and I compared Max. And I thought Max looked significantly better, crisper. I almost compared it to the way, what it looks like to go from like regular HD to like lower level 4K, or to go from like not quite as drastic as standard def to high def, but like it felt like a significant improvement. And I was happy because on Monday, Raw looked incredible. They had inside drones. They had outside drones. They had the drone show on certain entrances like John Cena's. And I think Liv Morgan also they did the drones outside to kind of replace. Remember when they did the augmented reality thing? And they still, I guess, sometimes do it. I think back to when Cody Rhodes initially debuted at Mania against Seth Rollins. You had you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. Raw looked incredible. And you got the cold open that had gone around social media. And Triple H in the middle of the ring, they had the giant kind of drape, the curtain around the ring. It drops. There's, pyro everywhere. Triple H kind of delivers what I would say is honestly probably better delivered as like a pre-going live sort of promo. Like, you're part of history. Let them hear you. Let them know your passion. Let them feel your passion around the world on Netflix. That to me is like more of a, kind of ready the troops beforehand. Maybe not, didn't really hit the mark for me quite as much, but this is Paul Levesque putting his stamp. I mean, as if we didn't know that he's the man in charge. This really does put his stamp on it, and they're calling it the Netflix era, and good on them. And again, incredible looking show. The 360 setup they had, where there were still people sitting up behind. I know they've done this before, but the way that they were able to shoot it in the Intuit Dome, where it's the highest tech arena in the U.S. It's the one that Steve Ballmer put a ton of money in to make it the place to go in L.A., more so than the former Staples Center, Crypto.com Arena, or whatever the hell they call it now, right? So you have all that. The Intuit Dome looked incredible. The lighting was fantastic. The video quality was sensational. But the show itself, right? If you keep up with the WWE at all, and again, you're willing to be fair, right? Like, I have a very hard time. Anytime I watch any professional wrestling show, I have a hard time sitting back and saying 10 out of 10, all hits, no misses, nothing to be worked on. I think with virtually everything in life, there are always things that can be improved upon. And I felt like that with Raw. Because for as great as it looked, the substance of the show itself, was okay. Some of it was really good. Some was And one of the biggest things that happened, well, it's what happened immediately after Triple H left the ring. Because the lights go out and everybody kind of has a general feeling of what could come next. We kind of figured that Tribal Combat was going to start the show. But who really starts the show? Who better than the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, depending on who you used to listen to. And it's The Rock, and The Rock comes out. He's got the People's Championship that was given to him by the wife of Muhammad Ali last year leading up to WrestleMania. I was thrilled because remember, night one of WrestleMania, that was when my wife was like, we have to go. Like, of course we're going to go. As long as the tickets aren't like ridiculously, we're going to go. And we did, and it was great. Got to watch The Rock with the fire, the Brahma Bull on the stage. On fire. It was great, right? The Rock got the pin on Cody Rhodes that night. And if you remember, one of the last appearances on TV, The Rock left Cody Rhodes covered in his own blood. Then there was the bad blood PLE. When The Rock comes out and kind of gives the throat slash to Cody Rhodes, you're like, oh boy, we're picking that up, huh? But it was almost immediate. Like, I knew this was not going to be a continuation of the final boss. And maybe the thing that should have given it away to everybody was The Rock's daughters were there, and he kind of hit you with the TU, right? He hit you with the sound that you're used to hearing from Maui that he then also explains as part of Samoan culture. So he kind of laid out for you that Dwayne Johnson was there, maybe not The Rock, and certainly not the final boss. And he cuts this long, flowery kind of promo where he's talking about how great it is that WWE has partnered with Netflix and shouts out the executives. And then he gets into the part that a lot of people have been pissed off about all week and have been trying to rationalize to themselves. And that's The Rock giving the flowers verbally to Cody Rhodes, who for some reason is in the front row of the show. Now, there's a possibility that WWE thought to themselves, oh, well, if Cody Rhodes is in the front row, that might look a little bit weird, but we're going to show throughout the course of 3 hours that other champions are also sitting out in the stands because, well, there's, Tiffany Stratton's out there. She just won a championship. She's out there. Braun Breaker's out there. They highlighted a whole bunch of people. Shinsuke Nakamura was out there. They're going all around, and you get celebrities, and you get cutaways to this champion, that champion. You get Rey Mysterio, who spins around. He's got the Eddie Guerrero shirt on. You have all this stuff going on, right? They show Topanga. They show Macaulay Culkin. And more. So a big celebrity thing. Showing you SmackDown's finest. Also out in the crowd. But Cody Rhodes, in the full three-piece suit with, of course, the complimentary pocket watch with the chain. He's dressed to the nines, right? Why is he in the front row? Why does Cody Rhodes, who's featured prominently on every advertising material for Raw on Netflix, he's front and center. Even if you go on to Netflix right now, where as of recording, Raw sits as the #1 program on Netflix in the top 10, Cody Rhodes is dead center. And yet he doesn't get his entrance on what they're billing as the biggest Raw in history. Some called it the biggest show in the history of WWE because of the mainstream acceptance of what the WWE had finally accomplished. And yet he doesn't get the entrance. He doesn't get the rub. He doesn't get to stand in the ring with The Rock. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, board member more so than the final boss, gives him his flowers that he's carried the company for a year, which on a human level, you go, hey, it's a good moment. That's really cool. And had it not been for the fact that they spent all of last year's build to WrestleMania with The Rock beating the holy hell out of Cody Rhodes, leaving him a bloody mess, covering a belt that says Mama Rhodes with Cody Rhodes. Had it not been for that, well then sure, people would have been like, oh, this is really nice. Great moment between The Rock giving the flowers to Cody Rhodes, giving him the rub. Really great moment. Cody Rhodes isn't like, I don't want to be insensitive. He's not a Make-A-Wish kid, right? Like Cody Rhodes is the champion. He's the guy that you're building the entire company around. He's the prodigal son who returned, and he's in the front row? What? Do you think that The Rock would have been in the front row if Hollywood Hogan, brother, had come out and said what he needed to say, brother? Is Stone Cold Steve Austin going to be in the front row, brother? No, absolutely not. If Stone Cold Steve Austin came out and had to say, what? And John Cena's out in the front row? No, it's not going to happen. What are we doing? Come on, why? Now, granted, I'm not even the biggest Cody Rhodes fan, right? I had a lot of critical things to say during his AEW run, but since he's left and things in AEW have gone very sideways, give the guy credit. And the chase to the championship on the part of Cody, great. The championship run itself leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion, but that's fine. You don't have to agree. But man, to have him in the stands as The Rock kind of cuts this promo. And then eventually, The Rock, who there was kind of tension with Roman Reigns, The Rock then says that, he believes in his cousin, Roman Reigns. And then we get the tribal combat match. And so I'm going to kind of speed through a lot of this, but tribal combat match is the same tribal combat match we've seen anytime they've done tribal combat. You get some of the new bloodline, some of the old bloodline. The biggest shock is probably Kevin Owens coming out of nowhere, delivering a stunner to Roman Reigns in the corner. But this felt like a conclusive end to the bloodline saga, at least as it pertains to the new bloodline versus the old bloodline, because Roman pinning Solo Sikoa, I don't know how Solo recovers. And it's not like it's the first time that Solo has had to eat the pin. I don't know where, I thought all along the idea was going to be that Jacob Fatu was going to be the ultimate X Factor, and that through Jacob Fatu's interference, Solo would be able to come out on the winning side against Roman Reigns, and that maybe eventually Jacob Fatu could replace Solo Sikoa as the head of this new bloodline. And hell, maybe it'll happen. Maybe what they're trying to do here is maybe Solo's going to acknowledge Roman Reigns, and then Jacob Fatu's going to say nay, nay. And maybe Jacob Fatu then leads Tongaloa and Tama Tonga and maybe a couple of other potentially debuting members of the bloodline to form his own. Now, do I think that Jacob Fatu is an exponentially scarier, more believable front-facing character than Solo right now? I do. I really do. Do I think that Jacob Fatu face-to-face with Roman Reigns is a more believable, Roman's in deep shit here kind of peril? I do. Do I think that's where this is going? I don't know. It really felt like a definitive end, which then brings me back to The Rock because, all right, well, if you're not going to kind of lead this to Rock versus Cody at Mania, or you're not going to lead it to Rock versus Roman, is The Rock really done? Was the choke slam by The Undertaker really the definitive moment? Because remember, at Bad Blood, The Rock came out as the final boss and gave the throat slash. So there's cognitive dissonance here. It doesn't totally make sense. That leads to Tuesday, where The Rock cuts another promo where he says that the final boss is always thinking 20 steps ahead, and the people just need to know their role, shut their mouths, and enjoy the ride that The Rock takes them on, which all sounds great in theory. And he might take people on a ride. And this might end up somehow turning into the final boss times 2, or the final boss turned up to 110%, maybe even beyond that. Good luck. I don't know how you're going to get there, but good luck. I saw a lot of people saying that with Raw, it was, you got Dwayne Johnson, you got the TKO board member, because it was important to kind of bring back in the casual fan, and the casual fan who might be on Netflix says, oh, I remember that, and they see The Rock and they go, oh, okay. And maybe it doesn't make sense to the casual fan that The Rock would come out and start cutting a heel promo on Cody Rhodes, but we all remember that Saturday night's main event happened, not that long ago, right? We remember that kind of felt like a house show with all the great nostalgia and Jesse Ventura being there, but it felt kind of like a house show. ultimately. And it felt like a show that was dedicated more to the casual fan than the fan that's been keeping up with it all along. And I get it. You only get a few opportunities to try to pull in that casual fan. But I felt like they did it once already, and it maybe didn't need to be done again to the same extent. Now, overall, 4 matches happened on the night. Okay? I think the women's match went maybe 15 minutes. Rhea Ripley wins the championship back. The Undertaker comes out. I go, why? They do the Brothers of Destruction pose. I'm like, all right, fine. Drew versus Jey Uso, I had no expectations for, and it's still underwhelmed. I like Drew McIntyre a lot. And I think Drew McIntyre in 2024 had the best year of his career. I think Jey Uso is a solid mid-card guy. I don't think main event Jey Uso is a thing. I don't see Jey Uso as being this like next level superstar in terms of at least like in the ring. His matches just don't do it for me. Now, has he gotten yeet over? Yes. Is Jey Uso one of the most popular superstars in the WWE? 100%. He's being featured on the Saturday night's main event promotional materials. So, like, they clearly believe that he could be that next level guy. I don't see it, but then again, they're not programming for me. They're programming for kids, and they're programming for the wider audience. And maybe people really believe that he could be that. I just don't see it. So that match underwhelmed, and I felt sad because I really like Drew McIntyre. And I felt like that wasn't the best match. But then we got to the main event, the one that I kind of really built up on the return episode of this, on episode 11 of It's Just Wrestling. And it was a good match between Seth Rollins and CM Punk, but it wasn't the match that I wanted. It wasn't a life-changing match. Now, I said to all of you a week ago, boy, they better not set this up to be a one-off. They better not set up CM Punk versus Seth Rollins to be a one and done. This needs to be a trilogy. I even explicitly said this cannot be a repeat of Eddie Kingston in AEW, where it felt like, oh, we're going to get a trilogy out of this. And instead it was really good face-to-face promo battle, rock-solid match, and then it's done and never spoken of again. Now, I don't know what happened late in that match. It looked like there was a lot of talking between the ref and Punk and the ref and Rollins, and there were some questions, comments, and concerns about whether or not Rollins might have gotten concussed. Was Rollins really hurt? Did that screw up the finish of the match? Did that affect anything? I did think that there was a little bit of beautiful poetic justice in the way that they finished that match. The GTS, the bounce off the ropes, Punk is on his knees, Rollins gets draped across, and once again a GTS the same way that Punk versus Jon Moxley finished prior to Brawl Out, where he's wearing the white tights. You remember how that all went down. A lot of blood. So that's the second member of the Shield that Punk has beaten in that way. And if you haven't seen it already, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But there's the side-by-side of the finish against Moxley and the finish against Rollins. And again, it's mirror image, and it's great. And I love that kind of parallel. And if and when Punk and Roman meet at Mania or wherever they end up facing off, because don't forget, Paul Heyman still owes a favor to CM Punk. If you get to a finish of a Punk and Roman match and we see the same, whoa, chef's kiss. Like, that's beautiful. That's cross-promotional, beautiful storytelling. That match was okay. That match was one of the ones where you walk away and you go, Punk is still really good, but he's physically not still a young guy. Like, some of the things that you see from this version of Punk, maybe he's not up to in the same way. And I still really enjoy CM Punk. Remember, I wasn't around watching wrestling when Punk was huge in WWE, nor did I see his work in Ring of Honor. So most of my appreciation for Punk came through his work in AEW. And there were times in AEW where I even felt like, oh, okay, like best in the world, I get it, okay. Still leaves a little bit to be desired because I'm used to seeing a different version of pro wrestling now. And I think that Rollins has had better matches against other competitors. And I think that Punk's match, the strap match against McIntyre, for example, was a better match. And I think that the Hell in a Cell match was a better match. But it doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with this match. It just kind of felt like after 3 hours of watching the show live, commercial breaks on Netflix, which I might never get used to, and watching a ton of just celebrities, watching a ton of appeals to the mass casual audience, I felt tired. I texted somebody who also works in Philly media, who is a big WWE fan and no longer really appreciates or likes AEW. He and I got into it a little bit, and I said, look, this was as it was happening. I was like, look, I have been looking so forward to seeing Rollins versus Punk. It's a Mania main event match, and we're getting it for free. They kind of get it for free anyway, although then again, you are paying for streaming. It doesn't matter. You're getting that match on Monday Night Raw, but at that point, like before the match even started, I felt wiped out. Because usually with Raw, I wait a little bit, I skip through the commercials, and it allows me to just go promo, match, no commercials. And that night I was watching, and by the end of the 3 hours, I felt wiped, and it wasn't like an AEW, 5 or 6 hour pay-per-view kind of wiped. It was all right, like this is the fourth match, and we're almost 3 hours in. And then it ends clean, and there's no real setup for anything else. Like Punk mocks Rollins with the go to sleep. But like, I don't know. I really hope that wasn't the end. Like, I really do hope that there's going to be another match. Because you still have a few months. But part of me thinks that they're going to pivot this into maybe the Punk versus Roman thing and where Heyman's favor to Punk lands. Like, I don't know. I really don't know. So, Raw was really good. Raw looked great. Raw, from a storyline perspective, it felt more like we were kind of closing chapters on storylines, and now you are officially on the road to WrestleMania and trying to get these people into new programs. And if that's the case, okay. But I am disappointed if that really is the end of Punk and Rollins. I'm a little bit bummed. If that's the end of the Bloodline saga, and if you're not going to get Rock Roman, or you're not going to get any kind of further interactions between The Rock and Roman other than putting the Ulafala on, like, I don't know. All right, so that was WWE this week. I want to get to AEW because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I really expected AEW to go balls to the wall. I really thought that AEW was going to go above and beyond because it has been such a big week for the WWE. That's usually where you see AEW turn up the heat. That's where you see them try to go out and put on the sort of show that makes you say, yo, WWE might have the better stories, and largely they do. They might even have the better production value, which it's impossible to compete with what we saw on Monday. But you know that the in-ring work is going to be next level with AEW. And there were parts of this show that absolutely delivered. Most notably, I thought that the match between Buddy Matthews and Will Ospreay was sensational. It was exactly what I expected to see. And I thought the ending angle of that match, and then some of the news that we heard after the fact, was maybe, possibly, some good setup for what's to come, because Ospreay and Buddy Matthews put on an absolute banger of a match to start the show. And Buddy is, I think, like one of the most underappreciated wrestlers, not only in AEW, but in the business as a whole. And we all know how great Ospreay is. But Buddy puts on incredible matches and very rarely wins in singles competition. And yet, it never has really hurt the guy. Like, when you see Buddy Matthews coming out to face Ospreay, in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, well, Ospreay's probably going to win. But Buddy looks like such a freaking star and puts on such great matches that you're like, you know what? Like, there's a chance. And Ospreay, some people don't like the fact that Ospreay's lost as many matches as he has in his AEW run. But to me, that actually puts the kind of like counter thought in the back of your mind where you go, you know what? Like, if they want to give Buddy a push here and have him go after like a Continental Championship or a TNT Championship, a win over Ospreay is totally within the realm of possibility. So I thought this match, and there's a sequence that was going around where, and actually Brody King shouted Buddy out on Twitter after this match about it, but the torture rack GTS to the curb stomp, it was an incredible sequence. These two put on a great match. And then afterwards, Ospreay cuts this very brief promo where a very good babyface promo to the crowd and says to Buddy, look, you don't need a leader. referencing Malachi Black. You don't need a leader. And if you ever need somebody, you have me. And so it kind of gets you. And listen, the entire time that Malachi Black has been in AEW, I've been a huge fan of Malachi Black. And he got in that initial program with Cody Rhodes. That felt legit. And you're like, wow, Malachi Black is going to compete for the World Heavyweight Championship. No doubt. And it's just been, there was some initial injury stuff. And then there was, the House of Black were big CM Punk supporters and vice versa. They were part of that Collision crew. And it felt like maybe they were getting arbitrarily punished because they had a good relationship with CM Punk. Now it sounds like per Fightful, Malachi Black's time has either ended or is about to end with AEW. And so maybe the House of Black is going to disband, or are they going to have the House of Black? Is there going to be a new leader who comes to the forefront? Is Buddy going to take over? Is Brody going to take over? They just brought back Julia Hart. Is she going to become the new face of the faction? Are they going to rename? What's it going to look like? Buddy has this great match. And everybody has gotten behind Brody King, which is also great. So you have these two guys that are wildly popular. And in theory, if those two went on a tag team run, everybody would be behind it. If you got to a position where you said, hey, Buddy, TNT champion, Brody King going after the Continental Championship, you could get behind that as well. Like, to me, there is a clear path. You could send either or both of those guys toward gold, or you could potentially have them go after the tag titles together, and it would help a tag team division that is desperately in need of these guys. This Ospreay angle is also interesting. Could we see a new United Empire? Could we potentially see a scenario? I don't know if we'll see it, but could you see Ospreay recruit Buddy Matthews? Could Brody King be involved? Is that maybe the thing that leads Brody King to go on his own singles run? Is Matthews aligning with Ospreay? I don't know. A lot of really interesting things came out of this first match, which I loved. But the rest of the show, there were some highs and lows. The Casino Gauntlet is one of the things that people look forward to the most. And Jay White won the right to be the first man in the match. And as they laid out pretty clearly, it's the first pinfall or submission. That's what wins the match. So you want to be in this multi-man match earlier, sooner than later. And there's a really cool moment in the match where Hangman also comes out, and then you hear the Whose House, Swerve's House, and then you hear this voice come on and say, haha, it's my house, bitch. Ha ha! And it's Ricochet. And so you're kind of setting up a little bit more there, and some mind games between Ricochet and Swerve Strickland, and to some extent, I guess, Ricochet and Hangman. And listen, the big takeaway from this match is that there are so many guys on this roster who, in theory, could be main event or main event adjacent guys. And it actually brings me to one of my problems that I have right now with AEW, which we'll get to in a second. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out Powerhouse Hobbs wins the match. And in doing so, I thought he looked fantastic. And we're going to see Powerhouse Hobbs go out and try to break Jon Moxley's back. And I'm a big Powerhouse Hobbs fan. Now, would I like to see Powerhouse get another title run? Would I like to see him get a TNT title run and have it done right? I would. Would I like to see him have a Continental Championship run? I would. I'm a big believer in Powerhouse. And he's a guy who they brought in 4 years ago who I think has a ton of upside, has the look, has the in-ring ability, has a very unique backstory that they've tried to touch on a couple of times. There have been some injuries that have derailed him. But man, there is a guy, a star in the making. There's a guy who already, I think, has star power in Powerhouse Hobbs. Now, he's going to go face Moxley, and he said post-match, not only am I going to beat him, but I'm going to make him my bitch. Ooh, strong words, but I like and appreciate it. So you have Powerhouse versus Moxley next week in Cincinnati. But this gets me to my overarching problem that I have with AEW right now, because eventually you get MJF and Jeff Jarrett in a promo battle of sorts together. And I like Jeff Jarrett a lot. And I think that Jeff Jarrett's resurgence, his renaissance as the last outlaw on the indies and then coming into AEW was very strong. I thought that like some of the shenanigans with the Sanjay Dutts and the Satnam Singh and the Jay Lethals of it all were maybe it wasn't all hits. Some of it felt really campy and kitschy and not the best. Do I like the fact that they're giving Jeff Jarrett this last run? Yes. Did I compare it to John Cena? No. The second that Jeff Jarrett came out last week and said he signed his final talent contract, in my mind, I went, oh, they did this last year with Sting, because I don't go tribalist mind and say, oh, well, WWE announced that John Cena's on his last year, so that must mean that Tony Khan felt like he had to do the same thing with Jeff Jarrett. No, I thought about Sting's last run that ended at Revolution last year, and I went, all right, well, they're going to do the same thing with Jeff Jarrett. And yeah, Jeff Jarrett says he wants to win the championship. He's not going to, and that's fine. And I have no problem with, like, giving him some time on the mic, because he's still very good on the mic. And I had no problem with him being in the Casino Battle Royal, because I knew he wasn't going to win it. The battle on the mic with MJF, I thought, left a lot to be desired. And I think that they're trying to figure out a way to get MJF back into something that means anything on this show, because he was once again lost in that Undisputed Kingdom bullshit mess. And now it seems like that's done and over, and thank God, like, they have cooled off MJF in a way I didn't think was possible. And yet, he still has it in him. And on the mic, Jeff Jarrett has it in him. And the thing that I wanted to see a year ago, when I was like, oh, if you really want to make MJF the hateable heel, not the guy that everybody likes to boo, I said, I think it was last year, the way that you get unbelievable heat if you're MJF is to bloody up Sting last year, leading up to his final match. Like, turn Sting into, tomato face, NWO Wolfpack Sting. Have Sting left as a bloody, broken mess. That's how you get people to hate MJF. They have done a good enough job of building up Jeff Jarrett as a babyface and getting people behind this idea of his last run, that if they really wanted to turn MJF into a heel, into a hateable heel, not one that people just enjoy booing and appreciate, if you want to get MJF hated, have him absolutely break down and break apart Jeff Jarrett. If you want to sell me that that's the idea to get MJF and Jeff Jarrett into a program that leads to Revolution in March, and that's how you're going to either send off Jeff Jarrett, or that's how you're going to try to heat MJ up back from being whatever he was post this Adam Cole overextended mess of a storyline, that's fine. Let's get MJF nuclear heat by dismantling and bloodying Jeff Jarrett. That's fine. But do I really need Jeff Jarrett to have weekly time on TV? Probably not. Do I see a potential path to this being still entertaining or worthy of TV time? Maybe it's on Collision from time to time. Yes, I do. I think that there could be something there. That gets me to the other problem, which is Moxley and the Death Riders. It is a dead program. I said last week, it has all the makings of the Devil storyline from a year ago. It's this big overarching story that's supposed to be intrigue, and then it just turns out to be an underwhelming sack of shit. And that's what the Death Rider storyline has become. There is no redeeming quality to that storyline. I let out an audible groan anytime the Death Riders come on TV. Wheeler Yuta has been pushed, and I don't think he's any better off now than he was when he started in AEW. People don't have nuclear heat for Wheeler Yuta. They want him off the TV. They don't believe in him. They don't believe that he belongs in a group with Claudio and Pac and Moxley. They believe in Marina Shafir. They believe that Marina Shafir has been made to look like an absolute badass. Yuta's not that guy. And if there is eventually going to be a turn here where Yuta realigns with Bryan Danielson, it'll once again be like, there are other guys on this roster who were young dudes that you could have turned into a total badass. If Powerhouse Hobbs had been in Wheeler Yuta's spot, would you fear the Death Riders more? You would. Do I think that Powerhouse Hobbs is a better guy on the mic than Wheeler Yuta? Indeed, I do. Do I think that Powerhouse Hobbs looks like he could compete for individual gold? Yes, I do. Would I be afraid to run into Powerhouse Hobbs? Yes, I would. Would I screw with anybody in the Death Riders if I were a talent and Powerhouse Hobbs were standing in the way? I would not. And yet they have decided to throw all of this push behind Yuta, who, again, in ring, perfectly fine. Does he have the look? Is he good on the mic? Absolutely not. The Death Riders thing to me is dead. The sooner it is over, the better, which is where Copeland comes into play. Because Cope, in theory, could be a threat to Moxley, but you have all these other guys that you could be pushing right now. You have Ospreay. You have Fletcher. right? You have MJF, you have Switchblade, you have Swerve, you have Hangman. That's 6 guys I would rather see in a main event world title picture right now than Mox and Cope. And I like Cope, and I like FTR a lot. And I'd be fine if FTR makes a run for the tag titles again. But I'll tell you what, I don't need to see what I'm seeing right now with Moxley and Copeland. It doesn't do it for me. It doesn't get me excited. Which leads me, I guess, to the big overarching thing and the thing that I was the most disappointed with. Kenny Omega comes back at the end of the show. When we saw Kenny Omega over the weekend in New Japan, he was presented as a star and a true god of wrestling. The aura was back. He looked like a star. He looked like a guy that you built AEW around. Oh, wait, because you did. He just had that aura back. And he looked incredible. And he and Gabe Kidd had this awesome match. I had never watched a Gabe Kidd match before. It was fantastic. Okay? Omega comes back at Dynamite in the main event segment. He doesn't have the same aura. He comes out with the untucked button-down shirt, the rolled-up sleeves. It didn't feel the same. He didn't. Now, the promo he cut was okay. And actually, like on a human level, connected pretty well, giving you some insight into all he had been through physically and into the fact that like he very well could have died. And we've heard this enough. And by virtue of Brock Lesnar going through the same thing, there is a certain level of belief in how serious of a condition it was. But like, we don't get a face-off between Omega and Okada, who he brought the Continental title to at World's End. We get Don Callis, who I appreciate as a heel manager. But I felt like we just went back to something that I didn't like the last time, Callis and Omega. And then I expect Fletcher to come out, but instead you get Lance Archer and Brian Cage, both of whom I also think are very good and should be probably competing for one of the secondary titles or for tag team titles. And then eventually Fletcher comes out. And who saves the day? Will Ospreay. And it sets up this final confrontation, this final face-off between Ospreay and Omega. And I saw a lot of people losing their minds after the fact that it was this like great moment. And you finally have these two lined up across from each other. And what a great moment it is. And can you imagine if they were to, actually be on the same side? And it didn't do it for me. It didn't. Because while, yes, you have now boosted up the profile of Ospreay and putting him on that same level once again as Omega, do I feel like it helped Omega, who is your returning guy, the face that ran the place, the face who had been sent away by the Elite? There's no follow-up with the Elite. There's no follow-up with the Bucks. There's no follow-up with Okada. There's no follow-up with Jack Perry. This is the final scene. And yes, Omega is one of your very best. And yes, Ospreay is one of your very best. And all I'm left wondering is why you couldn't finish this straight up with Omega going into God mode and sending away the Don Callis family. And instead, we had this. And this to me was underwhelming. But we'll see next week. I'll be back here Thursday morning, next Thursday, 8:30 a.m. on the It's Just Wrestling YouTube, Facebook, and X. I encourage you to subscribe. And if you like podcasts more, you can subscribe to this show on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. That link is in the description of the episode. And you can interact with the show on all social media platforms, including TikTok and Instagram. So until next week, I've been Russ Joy. This is It's Just Wrestling. And remember, no matter how angry you get, no matter how many angry people you find on Twitter/X arguing about being a tribalist, just remember, it's just wrestling. It's going to be fine. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your wrestling. Enjoy SmackDown and Collision. And I will talk to all of you next Thursday here on It's Just Wrestling. Talk to all of you very, very soon.